Goes by T-REV, so we'll call him that as well. And he joins us now.
Voiceless people get killed for other stupid choices. Standing up for the families that took a loss. This something that we find important. Rap game strong, chest up. Little homie, keep your head up. You can be whatever you want. Get rid of the fake and it will lead up. All my life I strive for greatness. I'm manifesting my time with patience. People try to copy us, but respect is earned. It's not an obligation. I love the fam and they love me back, and that's why I always have it back. I give a voice to those people who were never given a chance for them slimy cats. When you come here, you ain't a number to me. I really take time to read what I see. Don't forget to lock your doors, cause there's danger all up in these streets. Y'all really put life into the air that I breathe. I really am thankful for all of my peeps.
Yo, what is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome. We are here today. It is 11/8/2023. Happy Wednesday. Shout out to the Rev Gang family and everybody that is in the chat. I see What Is True, Leezer Chick, Rook T, Nancy, Julie, you know, Midwest, all the familiar faces. Again, Angelica. What's going on, Angelica? Like I said, we've been working on this documentary, but we do have some videos that I needed to come on here and watch with you guys today. As you're coming in, make sure you hit the like button. If you're new, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We got a lot to do in this a little amount of time. I'm going to be on for maybe about 3-4, I don't know. You never know. 3-4 hours. So let's get to it. It's been 5 days. Don't feel like it, but I've been working my ass off on that documentary. Maybe I'll show you guys a little clip of it before we get off. What's going on, Shaker? Shaker Maker. What's going on? Shout out to Shaker Maker in the building. Maker Shaker. Like the name. Buckle up, bitches. We on. What's going on, Tammy? Welcome. Trixie, nice to see you. Trixie 1967. Michelle Mouse for the 9 months. What's going on, Michelle Mouse? You coming back to Discord? What's up? You get the OGs back around, you know? I'm building up Discord right now. I'm bringing all the OGs back that loved T-REV, that don't want problems with anyone else. They are just here for me. I want to bring those beautiful people back around. I think they deserve to be here. Give them a round of applause. Just saying. Thank you, Rook, for the 10 months. I appreciate it, brother. Time Traveler. What's going on, my man? Or could be, actually, that could be ma'am, too. Right? Show T some love and smash. What's going on? Tammy Music. Like I said, Trixie. Okay, I seen that. I don't know why it's moving up. Lisa B. What's going on? Welcome. Lisa B. Welcome. Hump Day. Happy Hump Day. Happy Hump Day. Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you, Delana. I appreciate you guys. Lexi Texi in the building. John Messina. Hey, T-REV, let's go. What's going on, John? How you doing, John? How's your day, brother? Well, let's dive into it. I missed the last couple lives. Need a dose of T-REV. A lot of people told me they're not getting the notification. So if you are watching this right now, or you're watching this later on and you're not catching this live, but you somehow seen it tonight, and now you're at this point and you're not seeing, or you're getting unsubscribed from my channel, make sure you subscribe back, or make sure you unsubscribe and subscribe, and then turn on notifications all, because that's a problem. It's a real problem on YouTube. It is a real problem. I've got multiple emails saying, man, I have not caught no notifications from you, man. I'm pissed. What's going on, Diana? How you doing? What is going on, Diana? It says that Zana Kernodle's mom speaks out. Now, yesterday I had an interview with Coach Todd that, you know, on the documentary, and we touched up on a few things that he's got going on with Zana Kernodle, with her father. And they're going to a football game. And I think that we could push this, you know, endowment and send more little kids off into gymnastics. I think that we could make it a bigger thing than what it is. And I was something I was touching up on, you know, subject wise with Todd yesterday during the documentary that I had, you know, the little interview I had with him. What's going on, Jackie? Nice to see you. Tara, as always. Tara's been around for a hot minute too. What's going on, Tara? It's nice to see you too, though, Jackie. And Karen. Karen says, hey, T-REV, I'm just here for you. Thank you. I appreciate that. T, I got the boo, but I'm here for it. And I want to miss you. Yeah, we'll talk. I got you. All right, let's jump into it.
Is the
it's about to get nasty.
FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
When Nancy jumps on here, it's about to get nasty. But that last court date, they did say that they're not using the, the 21, what was it, 23-1 and all the other shit. They're using the actual swab from Bryan Kohberger himself rather than using that. So that's what they were talking about at the last court date. I don't know if most of you seen the last live or seen that news. What's going on, Footloose Will? He says, "What up, T-REV? I forgive you for that ugly Dallas hat. I hope you're doing well." Man, we took an ass beating by the Smeagol's, but that's a different story. We should have won that game.
Tearing apart the crime scene
won that game.
Of the Idaho 4 sleigh.
What's going on?
Why is that happening? Why is the FBI out in Idaho tearing up carpet, looking at the walls, looking at the windows, taking pieces of board? What are they doing? This as Bryan Kohberger, the doctoral student charged in the slaying of 4 beautiful University of Idaho students in their sleep or half sleep in the middle of the night, the wee early morning around 4 a.m. While he sits in his cell getting a special vegan diet, watching whatever he wants. He has control of his remote on TV and gathering female admirers on the internet. What's happening? When is Bryan Kohberger going to trial? And is the death penalty?
Why haven't we got a trial date? That's a very good question. Why haven't we got a trial date?
Still on the table.
Yes,
I'm Nancy Grace. This is Crime Stories. Thank you for being with us here at Crime Stories and on Sirius XM 111. First of all, let's kick it off. We've got an all-star panel to make sense of what we're learning right now, but listen first to victim Zana Kernodle's mother.
Kimberly says, "Trev, what's up with YouTube and subscribing to us with your channel? Weird. I don't know. I told you, I got a lot of emails. Maybe you're one of the emails. People are saying they're not getting the notifications and that they were unsubscribed to my channel when they never unsubscribed to my channel. And multiple people have reached out and told me that. That's a sign of shadow ban and some weird shit. So I already got in contact with YouTube, but definitely make sure if you're having that problem to unsubscribe, subscribe, and hit all. It should fix it.
That's what they told me to tell you. In the investigation that I would have liked to see go differently. I would have liked to see.
Thank you, Regina. I appreciate it.
I would like to see more coming from the kids that attended school there, the people that were at the frat party, the fraternity.
Again, in the documentary, we talk a lot about Zana Kernodle in the documentary that is going to be dropping. It should be about an hour long. Again, after today's live, I have an expert coming on, and then I have some more things to add to the documentary, but it's going to be about a good hour. Expect it to be, the documentary is dropping on the 13th. Okay, I'm going to be dropping it on the 13th afternoon wise, so be prepared for that. So be about a good hour.
Members, what were they all doing? What was happening at the party before they came home? I really,
again, I believe this is Kara on the phone. So if you're just coming in right now and you don't know what's going on, or you don't know what video we're watching, you're wondering like, what the hell is this? This is Kara. This is Nancy Grace interview that she had. I don't know if she had it with her in general, but Nancy Grace is covering Zana Kernodle's mom speaking out.
Just want, and anybody who was at the grub truck with Kaylee and Maddie, or at the bar with Kaylee and Maddie. I would like to see answers coming from those people.
It happens though. Mine got posted the other day.
It kind of bewilders me that we haven't heard anything from any of them, because they were the last people to see these kids alive.
I've got such an incredible panel joining us right now, but I want to go first to Gene Fisher, former chief deputy prosecutor in Boise, Idaho. Idaho is this jurisdiction where the slays, the 4 murders went down. She specialized in murder, and you can find her today at buildinghopetoday.org. Jane, you're hearing Zana Kernodle's mother who has lived through complete hell. You know, Jane, I thought I knew it all about grief and suffering when my fiance was murdered shortly before our wedding. But now that I have the twins, John David and Lucy, I didn't know anything, because the worst possible thing that could happen is to lose your child. I'm sure about that. Jane, you hear the mom, you hear Zana Kernodle's mom talking about things that she would like to have seen done differently in this investigation. This is Carrie Northington, and she's focusing on the parties leading up to the murders that night, the fraternity sorority parties. We know that several of the four were at a food truck really, really late at night, like after 1 a.m. They stopped to get food at a food truck before they went home. Have you, in your practice, Jane, talked to victims' parents, and you listen to what they're saying, and it may not be relevant to the case? Like, the DNA shows that Bryan Kohberger handled the murder weapon.
I agree 100%. I think that Bryan Kohberger did handle that murder weapon. I absolutely do not think that that is touch DNA. Is there anybody in this chat that believes, or not touch DNA, but I believe that that DNA came from Bryan Kohberger and was not planted. Let's just get right to the horse in the room right now. I don't think that DNA is planted.
And the sheath, because the sheath has his DNA on it, and it's practically under one of the dead victims. So maybe what Xana's mother is saying is irrelevant. Maybe it doesn't matter who was at the party 5 hours before, who was at the food truck 3 hours before. On the other hand, Gene, maybe it does matter, because Xana's mother thinks two people were involved. I don't. She does. But I find the significance, Gene. What if Kohberger was lurking around either of those two places? Wouldn't that?
Okay, so mom thinks that there was two people involved here. And I've talked to okay, so that's interesting. Mom thinks two people were involved. Noted.
Solidify the
we
case
got that
for the
noted.
state.
Good morning, Nancy. Yeah, I mean, I really.
Yeah, mom thinks there's two people involved. Let's go ahead and just start a little poll while we're in here, right? Do you think that there was two people involved? Like Xana's mom thinks. Do you think that there was two people involved, like Xana mom's thing, or like Xana's mom thinks? We're about to find out. $50-50. All right, I was locked in on that poll. All right, here we go. So, do you think that there was two people involved, like Xana's mom thinks? Yes, I do. No, it's Bryan. And 50-50 always had my mind open. All right, we'll leave it at that. Let's keep going.
Feel for her, for the parents, for the survivors in this, and the common. It's so common to have parents, victims asking some of these other questions and wanting to know exactly what she's asking. Who was at the party? Who was at the food truck? Those sorts of things. Because what's happened is unimaginable, and you just want all the answers and everything that you possibly can to understand how this could have happened. Now, as you said, some of that stuff is irrelevant. It isn't as though, it's certainly not here and not nationwide. I've just seen there hasn't been substantial amount of reporting on this, of law enforcement in the Moscow community the photos of the girls at the food truck,
Cassie,
trying to find everybody and anybody who talked to them. And they did do some follow-up, as you recall. They did have and they thought that they
So if you guys are just coming in right now, Nancy Grace is kind of having a conversation with Kara here, which is Xana Kernodle's mom. Xana Kernodle's mom thinks that there is 2 people involved in this, in the horrific homicides. And she's having that discussion here with Nancy Grace. So we're checking it out. I think it's interesting.
Had, I think it was the Uber driver.
Yep.
That was the suspect. And I mean, they did do a lot of
about 30 of them.
And how do you deal with victims' families? I mean, for you and I, we think that is irrelevant because we believe we know who the killer is, and it's not the guy at the food truck. And it's hold
up. And I'm going to answer as I see different comments. I see Untamed Spirit says, remember the dude making the sleep signal at the food mobile? Yeah, oh my God, we watched that so many different times. And I think the guy that made the sleep signal was the dude that was by the window by Madison, correct? Like, yeah, you're drunk, you need to go home and go to bed.
Some drunk frat boy at the whatever house, the Sigma Chi house or whatever house it was. But she's right.
Lisa,
we have to exhaust as prosecutors every single avenue. What if someone at that part of your food truck saw Kohberger? What if they were connected to Kohberger somehow? So I understand where the mother is coming from. I completely understand. As a layperson, especially that's not in the investigation every single day, she thinks, hey, is there relevance? And maybe there is. As of right now, there's not. But you hear Xana's mother speaking out, and later,
my man Honky Woods said, I think the sheath and DNA was planted. Ain't no way he did all that madness and left without tracks. That's a part right there that I feel like we don't know about. There's something that is sealed away. We got to always play this into our minds. There's something that is sealed away in the public, from the public. There's reasons that they're having these little hearings that we will not see. We don't see the paperwork on these hearings. It is done behind closed doors because what they show in the grand jury, they're going to use a lot of that at trial. So it's like, we got to think about what other details are left out. What if there is something? What if there is a shoe print match that we don't know about? What if there's other things that play into a homicide other than the little bit of information that we know now? Because this has a heavy gag order on it.
I'm going to let you in on her statements regarding she thinks that there is another person involved. A lot's happening in the case against Bryan Kohberger.
Boss,
right
you
now.
have been too since day one.
First of all, there has been a very powerful motion to dismiss the indictment. In other words, throw out the charges.
Right, throw out the charges. But Nancy Grace, what was in those charges? Like, what was in this in grand jury indictment? What was in there? What did they present to them? Because obviously they seen something that made them think, but they always go, you can indict a ham sandwich. So I understand that part. But there's got to be more evidence. It can't just be this sheath. And I'm sorry, this is just my thought. When I'm thinking about the Idaho 4 case, I don't think it's just the sheath and the DNA. I think there is other pieces. There's other key pieces of evidence that we don't know about. And that's why they're doing these secret, hearings, even when discussing the grand jury indictment. That's why they're doing it secretly, because there's shit that we don't know about.
And the judge, whose name coincidentally is Judge, is John Judge. So he's Judge. That's it. I want you to hear what the judge says about the defense's slew of arguments to have these charges thrown out. Listen.
The Idaho criminal rules, specifically Rule 6.5A, expressly states that probable cause is the standard, not beyond a reasonable doubt, for a grand jury's indictment. And I think I have 3 or 4 recent, because this argument has been circulating in the state.
I don't know about that. Devil Dog says you need more than you need more to indict a ham sandwich than what they have on Kohberger. I would have to respectfully disagree. They have this guy's DNA on the button snap of the sheet that's laying between a victim that is murdered. That's more than enough to indict. You could indict the whole ham sandwich warehouse with that.
I think I've had 3 or 4.
That's how I feel about it, especially here in America. What's going on, Nina?
Denying the motion and hearing. So I am going to deny that argument.
Whew. Okay. Look, we may think that there was no grounds for the charges to be thrown out, but you get one crackpot judge up on the bench, you don't know what they're going to do. I have had judges, one of the times I was held in contempt.
Do people not understand this too? And I know I keep pausing the video, but we got to add commentary here. We got to talk about this. Do people not understand too that they, allegedly they were murdered in bed? Yeah, threw it out there, murdered. People say unalived. I don't know why, but I'm just going to speak the facts. They were allegedly murdered in bed. Zana allegedly, maybe found on the floor there. So did Kohberger even get to the point to where, or whoever, Kohberger or allegedly whoever, did they get to the point where they were standing in blood in general? That's because people are like, well, what about bloody footprints and blah, blah, blah. But what about the positions they were stabbed in? What if he didn't step in blood at all? You get what I'm saying?
The judge was completely ruling against all the black and white letter of the law. And I said, and his name was Judge Presley, may he rest in peace. I said, Judge Presley, just turn around, and right behind you is a bookshelf. And on that bookshelf is the OCGA, the official code of Georgia annotated. Not just the code, but the annotations, all the case law supporting the law and the interpretation law. If you would just swivel your chair around and grab OCGA 30-blah, and look on page 356, you'll see that your ruling is completely contradictory to the law.
Now, Kate Parker said, I think more people were involved. I've lost my own daughter, so I know part of what they are going through. My thoughts on this case would be different if it was a violent attack. It's a very violent.
I was held in contempt, but I was right. It didn't feel very good saying I'm right when I was getting fingerprinted. But you never know what a judge is going to do. This judge did the right thing. What were the claims the defense was mounting? And they had a lot of claims. Listen.
Hours of arguments between Kohberger's lawyers, the prosecution, and the judge have occurred in private, behind closed doors, without cameras.
That is my thoughts. People keep making this argument. Well, he stepped in blood. He had to be why there's no blood tracks. There's no blood tracks at the house. There's no blood trail. What if he didn't step in blood? There's not going to be a blood trail if he didn't step in blood, right? I mean, the fact that they found some, latent footprint, one latent footprint. If he stepped in blood, that whole shit would be covered. The whole floor would be covered. I mean, at least to some degree. I think we could all agree to that. I mean, I definitely think it's a very big possibility that there was a chance he didn't step in blood.
But in court papers, Bryan Kohberger's defense team claims the grand jury was biased, there was insufficient evidence to charge Kohberger in the first place, and that prosecutors withheld evidence that would exonerate Kohberger. While the defense has made these serious allegations, they have yet to show any of the evidence to back up their claims.
Joining me right now, an expert who has been at the scene of the crime along with me. In fact, he directed me to a lot of points of interest. And I don't mean like I'm looking at Niagara Falls, that kind of point of interest. I mean, look at this. This proves X. Look at that. That proves Y. Drive this route.
Did some of you guys think that? So I think Regina made a point last time in chat that when the FBI went to the house, they were possibly, doing different scenarios and ways that Bryan could have got in. But I feel like for a prosecution, you would go based off what, if you thought they went through the back door, that's what you're going off of. But to break the possibilities, I don't know. There's no telling what's going on with what their thoughts are on how or how he did it in general.
That right. Look over here, not over there. That's what I'm talking about. Chris McDonough is with me, director of the Cold Case Foundation, former homicide detective, at least 300 homicides under his belt, host of a YouTube channel where I found him, The Interview Room. Chris McDonough, how upsetting. It never failed to upset me when the defense would claim, oh, she's withholding evidence, when I had handed over my whole file except for my own work product, my notes, my questions, my own.
That's such a great point, Big Dirty. You know why it's a great point? I'm sorry, guys. I got to do this right now. It's a great point because it's part of my docu-series. Let's go ahead and drag this over here, right? See all these different files here, part of this this little docu-series I'm working on. Let's go to here and pop this bad boy up, right? Because what you just said is actually holds some truth. All right, so let's go to open with. We'll open it up on here. So if you go look here, hold on, let's get to the window scene where you can see them swabbing in here, kind of. They're doing something here in this living room. So they were swabbing the living room floor, left a trail as part of the gag order. Yeah, they're in here swabbing something. So what you're looking at right here is the top of the stairwell. This is the top of the stairwell. And what Big Dirty is talking about is they were swabbing something because this is a living room. The vibe signs over here, and these state police forensics are standing right here. So they're definitely doing some type of work. So is it swabbing? I think we did see some swabbing there too. Pretty sure they're swabbing in this video. Watch. Yep. Look, she saw. So like Big Dirty said, and that's a fact. We've watched this video on my channel multiple times. I've downloaded it. It's like a November 15th Idaho Tribune video. So old, like 2 days right after. And it could have been recorded the night of November 14th. But like Big Dirty said, they were definitely swabbing something here. So yeah, good point. Good point, bro. Good point. They were definitely swabbing there. I'm gonna have to touch up on that.
Theories. But yet that argument would still be made, and it's a black eye for you, the homicide investigator, and the prosecutor, because it looks like you're playing dirty pool, that you're going to win through nefarious means, and that's no win at all, because it'll be reversed on appeal. We really take the punches in the gut, don't we?
100%, Nancy. And one of the worst things that could ever happen, to your point, is a rogue judge taking all of these points of the law into consideration and even giving them a valued weight. I mean, it's every family's nightmare. It's every prosecutor's nightmare, the investigator, public safety's nightmare, that the defense is.
Yeah, I don't mind doing that VR games, man. I don't mind doing that one. I mean, if the chat wants to do that, if you guys really wanted to go over the food truck video, maybe I'll post it up with the community tab, things that we could go back over. I don't mind. Like I said, I spent over 350 hours live talking about this case since it first happened in general. That's why the 1 year documentary is very important for me to get out on November 13th.
Is able to say, hey, they still are not giving us evidence, when in fact, they've turned over all the evidence under Brady to the defense, and they know what they have. It's right in front of them. And, I think this is the big push that's taking place right now. And we're just going to, like always, just see how this kind of plays out here.
Well, bottom line, you don't sign up to be a homicide investigator or a prosecutor to win Miss Congeniality, Chris McDonough. Nobody's going to go home crown Miss Sweet Potato. That's not happening. We are going to take the hits and keep on going. I mean, listen, if I paid attention to everything that's said about me or our program on Twitter and Facebook and Insta and wherever, I'd be hiding under the bed right now.
Kate, that's okay, because there's plenty of people that are uncertain that it was Kohlberger, and that's fine. That's part of being a human. There's going to be some people that just want to see more and make sure it's the right person. And it's same with me. I want to see like I said, I think there's stuff that's sealed, and there's evidence that was shown, I feel like, to the grand jury that we don't know about, regardless of the fact. And they're definitely hiding that from the public, or else we would know about pieces of evidence that they were going to use in trial.
Just, if you don't have a thick skin, you better develop one, and quickly. Guys, not only in the last days has the judge denied the defense motion to throw out the charges, the FBI has been back at the murder scene. Some call it the murder house. It's the crime scene. The FBI has been back sniffing around and tearing apart sections of the home, including yanking up carpet and more. Take a listen to our friends at Crime Online.
FBI agents have entered the King Road home in Moscow, Idaho, hoping to gain more information as the prosecution prepares for trial. According to NBC News, the University of Idaho says investigators asked to go back into the home and gather documentation as they construct visual.
Regina says, in through living room window, out the back door. That is kind of what you were talking about the last live, right? You said that the FBI was climbing through that top window, which would be the bathroom window. So you're saying we'd have to climb up and go around the front way to climb through that bathroom window and go into where Maddie was. But at some point he had to make it downstairs. If you're coming face to face with, or Dylan sees you in general, you had to come downstairs in her viewpoint. That's why I think this house and not, the house not being demolished is a big deal.
And audio exhibits, as well as a physical model of the home. Experts say this will help as the prosecution explains where evidence was found and why the placement of said evidence is important. Families of the victims have worked hard to prevent the King Road structure from being torn down as was originally planned. The family of Kaylee Gonzalez and the father of Zana said they were grateful the university is waiting until after the trial to demolish the home because it remains the biggest piece of evidence.
I want to circle back to Dr. Angela Arnold, a renowned psychiatrist, joining us.
That's a great point too, Lori. That's such a great point too. Search warrant. They took shoes and boots from BK's parents' house, I believe. If no tracks anywhere, why would they need those? Which brings us back to the latent footprint. Somehow, some way, the internet twisted that footprint to be Dylan's van shoe. That's what happened somehow out here. There was a narrative spent to where it was like, okay, that's Dylan's van shoe outside of her room. Okay, blah, blah, blah. But collecting shoes, they're obviously looking for a match to that latent shoe print. Wouldn't you think?
About why the victims' families may not want this home torn down. But first, I want to talk about something that I understand, and that is the probative value of this home. Do we still need the home? Why do we need the home? What, if anything, can it prove? It's been combed over with a fine-tooth comb. So why do I care that it's not torn down? Well, for one reason, correct me if I'm wrong, joining me, Dave Mack, crimeonline.com investigative reporter. The house was to be demolished, but that's been delayed, especially since Kohberger waived his right to a speedy trial. Correct. Now, this delay, I believe, has allowed prosecutors and investigators to create a very detailed 3D model of the home, and that could potentially spare jurors a visit to the crime scene that was left literally, quote, dripping in blood.
Oh, stop. I think the whole 3D is bullshit. Sorry, I do. And I even seen Coach Todd come in here and say, well, the 3D model is just as good, and they put on headphones and they're going to hear the same sounds, and it's going to be just like if they were in there. It's really not, though. You got to be in there to feel, to hear the exact same things. I want a trial date, says Haley. She ain't playing. Thank you for the 7 months, by the way.
But you know what? I would want them at the crime scene, but that's just me. I would want them to see the real thing. But I would also like, Dave Mack, that 3D visual in court for me to use as demonstrative purposes. That's in the law. You've got demonstrative evidence, and you've got, as I call it, real evidence. Real evidence is like fingerprints, DNA, things taken from the scene. Demonstrative evidence is evidence you create to demonstrate something to the jury. Dave Mack, tell me about why is the FBI sniffing around the King Road address?
3D.
Oh my God! They're building, as you mentioned, the models. Okay, the 3D model, and the real issue here is it's a 3-story house on King Road, and for some people, including Zana Granato's mom, they just don't see how one person can accomplish all that happened, stabbing to death 4 people in that building in a very brief period of time. What the FBI is doing by building this model, they're going to be able to the prosecution will be able to walk the jurors through it one by one and show them how it could be done and was done by one person, they believe, Bryan Kohberger. They'll be able to show them with that model exactly where he came in, where he went, the timetable they built inside the house, and how he exited. They'll be able to do all that with this 3D model. That's why they're there.
That's going to be some 3D model, because you know what the defense is probably going to do?
Nancy.
The defense is probably going to turn around and ask to take the jurors to the crime scene. And so help me, I would not be trumped by the defense. If anybody was going to demand a visit to the crime scene, it would be me, the prosecutor. And you know why? Because I would want the defense to be able to argue in closing arguments. They didn't want you to see the crime scene. We did. What were they hiding? No, and no. Who's that jumping in?
Gene.
Is that Gene? Gene
It was
Fisher?
Gene.
Jump in.
Yep.
Thank you, Bam Bam. Keep that hustle up, T Salute. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, you have to remember too. I really don't believe that this case is going to take place in Latah County in the small community in Moscow, Idaho. Boise is 300 miles south and 6 hours on a mountain road.
Mm-hmm. Butterfly, thank you for the
Idaho Falls, which is maybe the next biggest, is 10 hours. North of Coeur d'Alene, north of Moscow's Coeur d'Alene, Kootenai County, it's quite small. So, I mean, there are some of those issues as well, quite frankly, as well, as far as the crime scene and getting back up there, and what that actually would
Okay, let me
entail.
ask you a lightning round.
You guys know what I just found out? So for the trial, you want to, this is going to blow your mind. My fiance's grandma lives right, I think it was like 10 minutes from Moscow. And she was like, when the trial goes down, you're more than welcome to come here.
Has the venue been changed yet, Gene Fisher?
No, because they still haven't set the case for trial.
Is there a motion to change venue?
There won't be one until the case gets set for trial.
So, no. So, let's burn that bridge when we get there.
It's Coeur d'Alene, by the way. I was trying to remember the name of the town. It's Coeur d'Alene. So, however far Coeur d'Alene is, maybe 10 minutes, 20, 30, I don't know, but it's right by there. It was like Coeur d'Alene or something.
You're right. If the trial is moved, say, 5 hours away, it would not be expedient to take the jury 5 hours away to see the crime scene. That is why I predict if they do get a motion to change venue, it will be moved maybe 3 hours or less away so the jury can go see it in one day and return. Now, of course, we learned that visiting a crime scene is fraught with danger and
Harry, thank you. I appreciate the support to the channel. Thank you so much. Thank you, guys.
Reversible error, because when you see the crime scene, it's not the same as it was the day of the crimes. Number one, that can be argued on appeal. You don't know if somebody will be standing outside. How easy would it be for some jackass to yell out, Kohberger did it, or Kohberger's innocent, or
I know that one of the victims is from there. I believe I think maybe even 2 from Coeur d'Alene, but she lives right in Coeur d'Alene and said, you can come down when the trial comes, you stay here. So I was already invited. Pretty insane, though. Pretty insane. I was like, whoa. Like, when she told me that grandma lived in Coeur d'Alene, I was blown away.
Something, and that could ruin the whole case and be grounds for a motion to dismiss the case and get a whole new jury. So when you take people to a crime scene, You never know what's going to happen. And dare I remind everybody on the panel, when my colleague, Johnny Cochran, may he rest in peace, took the O.J. Simpson jury to the O.J. Simpson home, and they had completely done it over. No more pictures of O.J. with busty models around. There were pictures instead of a Norman Rockwell painting and him with his mother, and I think a giant cross was put up on the wall. You don't know how that scene's going to be altered by the time the jury gets there. So Dr. Angela Arnold joining me, as I mentioned earlier, a renowned psychiatrist. You can find her at angelaarnoldmd.com. Dr. Angie, there may be more at play with the victims' families not wanting the home to be torn down. Now, as I've told you before, I have never once sought out the spot where my fiance was murdered. I don't want to go there. Whenever I think about it, sometimes it still gives me a horrible, like a migraine headache. And I don't want to go there. I don't want that in my head with everything else. But the significance of this home, I don't know what it means to the 4 victims' families.
Well, Nancy, right now, it
Where's it at? Email it to me. I'll check it out.
Stands as a sort of a shrine to what happened. And this isn't over. I mean, the trial hasn't even started yet. And I imagine what it signifies to the family is this: if the house is torn down and demolished, it's over. Where this happened is over. And
like it never happened.
Exactly. And the man hasn't even been brought to trial. I mean, I find it very disturbing that they want to tear the house down. But you don't.
About time I heard somebody say the same thing I exactly think. I find it disturbing that they want to tear the house down. Especially I could see if this conversation was going on and trial had already taken place and justice was served. But we're talking about tearing a house down not even a year later yet. Still, we're not even at a year. And I don't know. I don't think we've ever seen anything like this.
There also doesn't need to be a jump that goes from let's not tear the house down to, oh, we're going to bring the jury there. But I think the house needs to stand as the place where this happened.
I hear is that Dr. Monty Miller?
No, that was Chris.
Chris McDonough, you're saying you agree. And Dr. Angie, I can't explain to you why I don't want the house torn down yet. Maybe something along the lines of it, make it as if it never happened, or
exactly. It's
plus,
just not right, Nancy.
I mean, to you, Chris McDonough, Director of Cold Case Foundation. I'm going to circle back to Dr. Monty Miller and Dr. Michelle Dupree joining us. Chris, it ain't over until it's over, and I don't want any destruction of evidence until this thing is over.
Yes, and I think what's happening right now, Nancy, there is why the FBI went back. And let's just talk about a couple of things real fast. Is one, they're doing a laser recreation, right, to create this 3D model, and that's called a FARO, F-A-R-O. That's the device that they use. But what else they're doing is
you just hey. Yeah. FARO, explain that, please. Don't just throw something out and drop it on us like a bomb.
JB, yeah, and that's a good point. It's like both sides are okay. It's cool. Take it down. But the victims' families, for the most part, want the house to stand. So, what is the point? What is the discussion? Why would the school or anybody want to push forward with something that the victims' families are asking you please not to do? Make that make sense. So to go ahead and push forward with doing something like that, and you got the victim's family standing there saying, please, no, wait till after trial. That's the ultimate disrespect.
But not explain it.
Sorry about that. Well, what this device does is it spins in a room, and it can literally go down to an exact dimension within an eighth of an inch.
Cool.
And so it'll basically mirror everything within inside of that room. But the other test that they're running in there, I would assume, is an acoustics test. And they're going to correlate that back to any video that may have been in the neighborhood if there was sound on that video. and they're going to correlate that to the exact spot of where that sound would have originated inside of that house. So to tear that house down right now, to Doctor's point, and I know you talked about this early on, I think that would be a very huge mistake.
That's a fact.
Ultimately, until the trial is completed, and at that point, let it be what it needs to be.
I know the state thinks they've gotten everything that they need, and the defense has had the same opportunity as the.
Isn't that Miss Gloria from you lived in Pennsylvania? You live in Pennsylvania, right? I remember you being in here during the. I think it was or not Pennsylvania, Maine. You live in Maine. Shout out to you. I hope everything's been going good and the town is recovering well. I do remember you, Miss Gloria. Danny says, especially since it's so toxic, or maybe they're afraid of lawsuits. None of this makes sense. Like I said before, the Parkland building here from the MSD high school shooting is still standing.
State to inspect the home, but I would rather them wait till it's all over. Dr. Monty Miller joining me, director, forensic DNA expert. You can find Dr. Monty at forensicdnaexperts.com. Dr. Monty Miller, I believe they've gotten all the DNA evidence that they're going to get.
Right.
Once you let a lot of people in the home, evidence is ruined. They've gone through the home with a fine-tooth comb. But what is your take on whether they should demolish the home?
No.
Well, I mean, just from a crime scene DNA perspective, you wouldn't want to destroy it because you don't know if you're going to need that house again. The defense could raise issues, the prosecution could raise issues, and at this point, you can always go back and look at it. Once you demolish it, you can't, and there's no real benefit to having it destroyed at this point. So why not just keep it till the trial's over?
Guys, a lot happening in the case right now, but I want you to hear more. We've had the motion to
if you're coming in, you are smashing the like button, FTA for the algorithm, and also make sure you subscribe to the channel. Turn all the notification bells on. If you haven't been getting notifications, I'll tell you why. It's because YouTube is screwy, so you gotta, unsubscribe and resubscribe sometimes, and it'll fix it. So if you've been one of those people that emailed me about those problems, that's all you got to do to fix it after this stream.
Dismissed by the defense has been denied. We have the FBI swarming the crime scene again. Now, listen to this.
Yeah, no, I don't want them to. Not until after the trial. I mean, for obvious reasons. I mean, obviously the jurors.
I mean, that's from what we were told, JBs, and I'll play this back a little bit so we can cut back in on the conversation directly where it was at. But JB says, didn't the owner of the house give the house to the University of Idaho, the house for free? Yeah, give them to him for free. So I thought that's what I thought. I don't think they bought it from him or anything. I think that he donated it to him or whatever, or just gave it to him. So I don't know how the whole exchange went down, but that's what we read. I'm sure we all read the same thing.
Would maybe want to do a walkthrough, or maybe there's something they missed. I mean,
everything was taken.
Obviously, yeah. I
that house again. The defense could raise issues, the prosecution could raise issues, and at this point, you can always go back and look at it. Once you demolish it, you can't, and there's no real benefit to having it destroyed at this point. So why not just keep it till the trial's over?
Guys, a lot happening in the case right now, but I want you to hear more. We've had the motion to dismiss by the defense has been denied. We have the FBI swarming the crime scene again. Now, listen to this.
Yeah, no, I don't want them to. Not until after the trial. I mean, for obvious reasons. I mean, obviously the jurors would maybe want to do a walkthrough, or maybe there's something they missed. I mean, obviously, yeah, I definitely do not want them to tear it down. Not yet.
Donation, right?
Eventually, yes, but not until this is all blown over.
You're hearing Zana Cronoble's mother, Karen Northington, agreeing with us. Don't tear that house down. Now, her feelings, I don't know if they're based in the evidence or if they're based in emotions, but she wants the house standing Let's move forward.
Whoa. That cone that you seen out there at the Danilo Cavalcante, he's speaking out. That cone says, frankly, I'm shocked the homeowner is allowed to give the home away, or was allowed to give the home, to give the home away. Huh. Interesting. That cone. You said, I just wonder if they knocked it down. Who would it benefit the most? What's the intent here? JB wants to know.
Forward, listen.
Bryan Kohberger's defense team now wants to know exactly how DNA was collected at the crime scene that prosecutors say places Kohberger at the scene of the crime. The term IgG stands for investigative genetic genealogy. And it was this process that was used to collect DNA from another source and then match it to the DNA found on the knife sheath that was found on the bed.
Tell me if it's Dan. Am I saying it right? Danny or Dana? Let me know if I'm saying which one's right. Because sometimes I've seen Dana's like spelt the same exact way, and then Danny's same exact way too, for female wise.
Bed next to the bodies of Kaylee Gonzalez and Madison Mogen. The sheath was found face down, partially under Madison Mogen's body and partially under a comforter on the bed. The DNA found on the sheath was initially compared to DNA from trash recovered outside the Kohberger family home in Pennsylvania last year. Using IgG.
Whoa. Then he says, you're welcome. Wish it was more. Losing my dad and husband 3 weeks ago has crushed me. You lost your dad and husband 3 weeks ago? That's sad. I'm sorry to hear that. Wow. I'm surprised you're able to sit up and function. My heart goes out to you. Prayers to you. Wow. I don't even know. Dad and husband. My dad had a heart attack and I was freaking out. Wasn't online for weeks. I'll tell you what. Keep the strength. I want the strength that you got, because you got some damn strength to be sitting here 3 weeks later and have a being positive. Salute to you. My prayers go to you and your family. God bless you.
He allowed investigators to build a family tree of potential relatives of the suspect. Once a cheek swab from Bryan Kohberger was obtained, investigators used a more direct DNA comparison using technology similar to that employed by services like Ancestry.com or 23andMe.
Okay, Dr. Monty Miller with us, famed DNA expert. Dr. Monty, explain, and also if you could give us, dummy down for me. I'm just a trial lawyer. You're the scientist. Explain IgG and what are they talking about?
So what happens is in criminal investigations and with criminal DNA that's typically used in court, they use one kind of technology to read the DNA. A completely different kind of technology is used for the ancestry, the IgG type DNA. And so what they did was they took the DNA and they ran it for ancestry in order to develop the suspects. And they used that to identify Kohberger as one of the suspects. Then they collected trash from the house to connect it to Kohberger's father, and they could tell from that the DNA, at that point, when they identified that it was probably a son of the father, they were able to get DNA from Kohberger himself, compare it to the DNA by traditional genetic forensic means, and they were able to identify him that way. So the genetic genealogy, the IgG stuff, was used to find him. That's not what was used to identify him as the person in the house. But the same DNA was used, but it was used first for genetic genealogy to find him, and then it was run a separate way, a different time, by different technology to identify him as the source of that DNA.
And that is what they talked about in this last court date. That's on Bryan Enton's Twitter page. So if you missed the last court date and you want to see video footage of it, I played it on my last live, and we covered that here. Or if you want to go watch it on your free time and you ain't seen it, it is on Bryan Enton's Twitter page. If you scroll down, you'll find it. I'll retweet it just for people who want to find it easier. Bryan Enton was there. Here it is right here. There's also a couple interviews with the Gonsalves family, new interviews that I want to check out. Those are coming up. So we have a couple Gonsalves family interviews, and we got a couple more things to go over. And this one was, oh yeah, this is when they were out in front of the house right here. Hold on, let me pull this one over here. Right, this is when they were out in front of the house right here. Remember this? The FBI has finished their work at the house. This is what the people were like. Well, they were doing a simulation here. Somebody believes that the FBI was doing like a simulation of him crawling through the window or whatever. I thought they were just taking the boards off. Oh, let's scroll back up. Let's go back down. Court date is. What was that court date? Let me retweet this court date for you guys real fast. There it is right here. Again, I reposted it before, but so for Bryan's court hearing November 2nd, that's what this is. I just retweeted it. For those who want to find it and want to watch it, all you gotta do is go over there. Let me drag this back over here. We get back to it. But yeah, we got those two interviews. I want to actually watch those interviews. So let's dive back in here.
This juncture, the state is claiming they're not going to use IgG, that type of DNA process, at trial. But the reality is, if the questions are asked on cross, it will come into play. To Dr. Michelle Dupree joining us, a forensic pathologist, medical examiner, former detective in Lexington County, author of Money, Mischief, and Murder, the Murdaugh Saga, the rest of the story, and she literally wrote the book, Homicide Investigation Field Guide. Yep, right. Dr. Dupree, weigh in.
Nancy, I think I understand it sort of from both sides, but keeping the house, especially right now, is so important because things could have been missed. And I think that they need to go back and be able to, I would want the jury there. I'm totally with you. I would want the jury to see this. But if you're the defense attorney, I guess you wouldn't.
So Aspen says, did we ever find out who those 5 makes were that were in the house that night and didn't walk out with a single thing? I was watching Circus, but I don't know. I can't get on board with this theory. What do you think, Trev? Are you talking about the 5 guys that walked out, kind of cowboy hats, etc., got into a van, took off? Those seem to be investigators, because I actually did a little deep dive on that on my own and went back and was able to find interviews where Chief Fry was standing outside of the police station, and those same people, well, 2 of those same people who were in that van ended up walking right by Chief Fry and going into the police station. So I was able to find that, if that's what you're talking about. So I think that they are either feds or they work with them. They have to be working with him, because he was right there. He walked right by Chief Fry, and it was the same guy that got into that van. 100%.
The fuck are the Texas Rangers?
I don't know. I think the defense may be able to argue all sorts of things once the jury gets in that home. Big question, is the jury going to see the home? A lot of rulings that are going to impact this case are happening right now. Listen.
The DNA matching Bryan Kohberger to the knife sheath could be the prosecution's strongest piece of evidence tying Kohberger to the murders. KTVB reports Kohberger's lawyers claim they need the information about the DNA collection to help prepare their defense. But the prosecution says they did not use IgG to obtain any warrants, and they're concerned about innocent relatives' identities being made public. Judge John Judge said he will consider the interests of the defense and the prosecution as he reviews all of the IgG information the state and the FBI have, and then he will decide what can be disclosed.
This is what's happening. The state has used IgG science to narrow down potential suspects. A well-established buccal or buccal swab was used to positively identify Bryan Kohberger. Kohberger was already identified by his car. Isn't that correct, Dave Mack? So the state could have gone forward without the IgG test at all, based on the car being a probable cause, right?
They were able to track, yes, you're absolutely right, Nancy. They had other means of going about this, which is what they're pointing out now. They're saying that this IgG stuff is irrelevant. It's not part of our case. It was just a tool, but they had other ways of identifying him. As you mentioned, the car, it is the perfect, it actually puts him where he needed to be.
So forensic says, if I was a juror on this case, I definitely want to walk through during the day and a visit at night.
Be in terms of what the prosecution is looking at. So you're dead on right. They had other ways of going after Kohberger besides the IgG. They're just using all the tools in the toolbox.
Guys, the case is culminating. The case is rapidly moving toward trial. When will the trial date be? We all know that once the death penalty is announced, then the delay will be even longer. Take a listen to our friends at Crime Online.
The parents of Kaylee Gonzalez recently spoke out about the death penalty for the murder of their daughter and 3 others. Steve Gonzalez said they wanted the death penalty rather than a life sentence, and he mentioned how BTK, Dennis Rader, gets special treatment in prison because he's smart. He writes papers for other inmates. But a death penalty sentence would put the killer in a cell 23 hours a day, waiting, regardless of how long it takes before there is an execution.
In the midst of all of this, one of the victim's mother has been forced into the position of defending her daughter's reputation.
So I got that video and hold up. So it says Dr. G explains. So behavior and body language in Bryan Kohberger's motion to dismiss and no camera hearing. Wow. Yeah, we're definitely gonna have to. Maybe some of you already seen it. We might have to check that out.
How is a beautiful young girl who is murdered, half asleep or fully asleep, somehow become the target of derision and false rumors? Listen to Kara Northington defending her daughter.
I think there's a lot of rumors going around that she was a drug dealer, or this was somehow like a cartel hit because she owed the cartel money. That's just not true. She wasn't a drug dealer. She was going to school. She had a job. She was working. She was doing all the right things. You know, she wasn't on drugs or dealing drugs. She did like to party. She was in college. She drank with her friends and partied, but it wasn't anything like drug dealing or anything like that. So I think
exactly, Mike.
I think those rumors just really, those are what I would say have wronged her.
I don't understand it, why crime victims, as young and innocent as these 4 are being dragged through the mud. Dr. Angela Arnold, to top it all off, here you hear the parents of these victims having to defend the reputations of their children. Who are these trolls attacking the victims?
She said who?
Hideous.
Excuse me. The fuck did you just say?
What did Nancy really just say? What I thought she just said? She said what?
Excuse me. The fuck did you just say?
Through the mud. Dr. Angela Arnold, to top it all off,
who are these
here you hear the parents of these victims having to defend the reputations of their children. Who are these trolls attacking the victims?
Who are these trolls?
It's absolutely hideous, Nancy.
YouTubers.
I believe that people start rumors for a lot of different reasons. And one of the reasons is so that they can feel like, well, if I have never done that, if I have never participated in that kind of activity, or if my children don't do that, then they're less likely to be murdered. So there's a reason why she was murdered. It's the most hideous thing in the world to all of a sudden create a story about a victim.
As if this teen girl was murdered because she's part of the cartel. Of course, Zana had just turned 20.
Hey, I'll tell you what. I first heard that, and you could run it back right now. Correct me. Me and Ismic were on panel, and somebody sent me an email. Said check your email, and they sent for some reason, it was Carr's information that they sent out earlier. And there's like, she got caught with $500,000 worth of fentanyl. And you could go back and fact check me on this on the early lives back when nobody knew who Bryan Kohberger was. And I was live talking about this on panel. Like, again, I had Isaac up here and one other person. I think his name was Santa Joe. Everybody called him Santa Joe because he looked like Santa. But again, somebody sent me the thing, and they were like, well, she got caught with $500,000 worth of fentanyl, allegedly. And I'm like, well, that's crazy. And on the paper, it didn't say what she was caught with. It just said possession.
And she's what, connected to a Colombian drug lord? It's insane.
Right. And Nancy, okay, and so what if she parties? Kids are supposed to party when they're in college, and you're supposed to have a good time. And so this girl gets slaughtered, and now people are going to say ugly things about her. Why weren't they saying ugly things about her previous to this?
Right.
If she was such a hideous person.
I mean, Chris McDonough, you have investigated so many homicide cases. This is straight out of the defense playbook. Attack the victim. Don't look at my client. Look at the victim. They're horrible. And you could not find any more beautiful and precious college students than these four. So what if she had a couple of drinks? Nobody cares. She was slaughtered in her sleep. Where's this coming from? And isn't it true you see it in practically every homicide case?
Yeah, but I think we're at a different point here, Nancy. I mean, the civility of what's taking place here in our society. This is just an example of it. This poor mother, when we hear her heartfelt pleas about defending the reputation of her daughter, what's her crime? Her crime is she went to bed that night. And she was in her bedroom. And yet this poor mother, and I know that feeling. I know the depth of that feeling.
To you, Gene Fisher, veteran trial lawyer, that always happens. Is it right? No, it's horribly wrong. And it always happens. Blaming the victim somehow.
Alicia?
Yeah, I mean, it happens all the time, but I think in this case, it has really, it's really bad. I mean, some of the things that have been written and said about the victims in this case, even the surviving victims. I mean, it's one thing that they're attacking the victims, but they're also really attacking the surviving victims and coming up with these wild stories. And I think the comment about the lack of civility really does show a really sad state of where we are right now in our nation, quite frankly.
As long as I can remember, as far back as I can recall trying cases, the victims were always attacked. I don't think it's anything new. It's always happened, and it's always been horrible. Listen to more of Zana's mother, now in the position of having to defend her murdered daughter. Listen.
Well, Zana was an amazing girl. She was really funny. She was fun to be around. She always made sure everybody around her was having fun. She was just very happy, go lucky person. She loved her friends, loved her family very much. She's very dedicated to everything she did.
Damn, Alyssa, that's crazy.
She was just an amazing person.
I hate that the mother is in this position where she feels like she has to defend her murdered daughter's reputation. Some world-class a-hole is spreading false rumors about Zana and the other victims and the survivors. But Zana's mother has come up with...
I wonder who those people are.
Get the fuck out of here!
...with a very unique theory. Listen.
To me, it seemed like more than one person did this in such a short amount of time. The time frame that they're giving, there's just no way that one person could have done it. So I think that if he is responsible, that he had help.
So trying to figure out who would that other person be. To Dr. Monty Miller, this is why the DNA is so important. No other identifiable person's DNA is at the scene other than Kohberger's.
Well, they did find some DNA from some other people, but they weren't able to identify it. That was a house that other people were in. It wasn't isolated with just the residents in there. So it's natural that you would find DNA from other people that were in that house, but they weren't able to identify it. So they wouldn't be able to know whether or not some of the other DNA was attached to the crime or whether it was just attached to somebody visiting. That's different with the knife sheath, where that was clearly something that was probably a part of the crime and had the DNA from whoever brought that knife there. The other thing is that I wanted to bring up about the DNA is, with the defense wanting the, DNA from the ancestry testing, part of what they may be looking for too is did they develop any other suspects other than Bryan Kohberger? So they want to know, do we have any value in that information for us to find somebody else rather than our client? So there's a lot going on with the DNA here, more than you would think. And they certainly are going to try to identify any of the DNA that they found in that house, but they don't necessarily have a connection to the crime with any of the other DNA.
Exactly. Where the other DNA was found, I believe, is nowhere near the dead bodies, but we'll see. And Dr. Michelle Dupree, forensic pathologist and expert, isn't it true that the wounds on the victims' bodies indicate one type of weapon?
Yes, Nancy, that is true. And we can often tell that, of course, by the wounds themselves.
How do you do that with knife wounds? This is very critical because it's right to question the evidence. Zana's mother's correct. You've got to test every piece of evidence, see what it proves or disproves. And she should wonder, was there more than one person? As far as
what I said about the DNA, they need to definitely test that.
I can evaluate the evidence and analyze it, it seems like there's one person. But you have to test the evidence. So what do the wounds prove, if anything?
Well, we measure them. We measure the wounds, and then we can actually make a cast or a mold of the wounds many times. And then we can compare that to a cast made from the actual weapon itself. And they're very similar or similar enough that we can say that it is the same weapon.
Justice moves forward as we wait for the trial of Bryan Kohberger. Goodbye, friend.
Goodbye, friend. Goodbye, friend. I appreciate you. Goodbye. That was a good one. Oh, man. Next. Top 5 issues delaying Bryan Kohberger's trial. Let's dive
into it. But in a capital case, I would be awfully uncomfortable.
He said, I feel like this trial is going to be 100% the defense discrediting the police and investigators. Yeah, most definitely, Mike. They're most definitely going to be attacking that. And all different types of shit. Dylan, Bethany, the investigators, probably use that video from the Idaho Tribune, etc.
Not having my team, even if we divided it up, look at every single thing. And that has to take some time and some money.
What is delaying the trial of accused quadruple murderer Bryan Kohberger? As we near the 1-year anniversary of the killings that rocked a small community and captured the attention of the nation, we bring back on evidence expert Professor Jules Epstein to analyze the top 5 issues that might be holding up this trial. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. The case of Bryan Kohberger is one that we've been covering extensively here on Sidebar. This is the man accused of stabbing to death 4 universities.
If they could do that enough for him to get a not guilty, then clear that was an issue. Just my opinion. We'll see how it comes out.
University of Idaho students in an off-campus rental home back on November 13th, 2022. Ethan Chapin, Madison Mogan, Zana Kernodle, Haley Gonsalves, they were all brutally killed. This happened in the small town of Moscow, Idaho. Bryan Kohberger, a doctoral student in criminology at
I kind of feel like they already had him against the ropes, regardless of the fact. Even with a speedy trial, I think they would have had success.
By Washington State University, was apprehended after about 6 weeks after the killings, arrested at his parents' home in Pennsylvania. He was extradited back to Idaho, officially charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of burglary. The state said it does plan to seek the death penalty in this case. Kohberger still behind bars, awaiting a trial, which, by the way, a trial date that was originally set for October 2nd, but that date has seemed to come and go. And we seem no closer to actually taking this thing to a jury. And one of the main questions I keep getting is, why is there a delay? What is the holdup in the Bryan Kohberger trial? Well, to talk more about what we see are 5 big issues, let me bring in right now fan favorite Jules Epstein, evidence expert Edward D. Albaum, professor of law and director of advocacy programs and clinical legal education at Temple University Beasley School of Law. Professor Jules, great to see you once again. Thanks for coming here on Sidebar.
Honored to be here.
Let's go through the issues. We're going to start with issue number 1. I'm going to lay
Who doesn't? What, Zana? Zana Kernodle?
out each one, and then we'll get into it. So the first one is the waiver of a speedy trial. So to set this up, first, under the United States Constitution, every citizen has the right to a fair and speedy trial. And under Idaho law, a defendant has to go to trial within 6 months of their arraignment, which for Kohberger happened back in May of this year. So unless that would happen, unless a defendant waives that right. And Bryan Kohberger did just that. He waived his right to a speedy trial. And when he did this, the judge wanted to make sure that Kohberger understood exactly what waiving this right meant. It's one of the few times we've actually heard Kohberger speak in court.
Well, you heard all that, Mr. Kohberger? Yes? Yes. And is that the case that you want to waive your speedy trial rights? Yes. Do you understand that those rights?
I'm pretty sure they weren't checking out. So I thought they were doing a 3D model.
Are statutory in Idaho, also protected by the United States Constitution and the Idaho Constitution. Yes. You understand that if you waive, you're waiving really forever in this case. So if we were to push this out, this case, and then something else happens that allows us or requires us to push it out a little farther, you can't claim your right to a speedy trial at that point. You understand that? Yes. So have you had enough time to discuss this with Ms. Taylor? I have. Is anybody pressuring you to waive your speedy trial rights? No.
Okay, so Jules, how important was it for Bryan Kohberger and his team to waive his right to a speedy trial?
Yeah, that's true.
This is critical in a capital case. A death penalty case is really 2 trials. It's, are you guilty? And if you are, is there information that can be developed that would support saving your life, having the jury vote against the sentence of death? This case has a tremendous amount of material just on the guilt innocence issues, thousands and thousands of documents and pages and all sorts of things that takes a while for any lawyer to digest. But at the same time, they have to be doing a complete life history of Mr. Kohberger, and actually the state of the art in representing anyone facing the death penalty is to do a multi-generational study, who they are, where they came from, what might have gone wrong in their backgrounds. That can be what went wrong in schooling or in home discipline, or mother had an alcohol problem, or Lord knows what, to develop a picture of the whole person. Because when you are facing the death penalty, a juror can vote for life for any reason if they find it compelling.
Okay, so we want to thank Morgan & Morgan for sponsoring this video. I think it's pretty clear from the stories.
Really good. There's a video out there about the body language from the past court. I don't know if it was a body language professional or what.
That we cover, that it's not always safe out there.
Looks like it's
when you're hurt, it can be pretty confusing. It can be thousands of people. Waived his right for a speedy trial. What are some of the things you think they're doing behind the scenes that are preparing them, if he's convicted, to fight for his life? Are they interviewing family members, classmates? They looking at his mental health records? What do you think they're looking at right now?
Everything you mentioned and probably a dozen things more. They want to look at school records. They want to talk to neighbors from where he grew up. They may want to have him assessed by a mental health professional so that they can see, and I'm not saying any of this applies in this case, but this is the type of thorough preparation that should happen in all capital cases.
So the video that you did send me is a body. Okay, I bet he states he is licensed. He's a licensed. Okay, I bet.
Is there a history of psychiatric illness? Is there any organic brain damage? Given that he was fairly high functioning, right? This is a guy who's in college and grad school. I'm not sure what they're going to find there. But you're always looking for things that either...
No, we're about to look for it right now. I'm about to show you. Hold on 1 second. We'll go back to that. Hold on 1 second. Let's play this.
Hey everybody, Dr. G here. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and body language expert, and today we're going to be analyzing. Hey everybody, Dr. G here. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and body language expert, and today we're going to be analyzing the behavior and body language from Bryan Kohberger's latest hearing. Currently, Bryan Kohberger is awaiting trial for the murder of 4 college students. What this hearing covered was whether or not cameras were going to be allowed in the courtroom, as well as whether or not the charges could be dismissed. Before we get started with this analysis, I do want to remind you of a couple of things. One, this is not a psychological evaluation of any kind. These are just my opinions based on his behavior and his body language. In addition to that, I do want to remind you that I do have a course on body language. If you're interested in that, you can check it out at Dr. G Explains or in the description below. Last thing before we get started is I do want to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, let's go. So it's been a while since I covered any Bryan Kohberger footage, but this one shows some different body languages, which is why I thought it might be interesting to talk about this. Let's just...
If you're just coming in, we are diving into a behavior and body language expert. He's diving in on the last hearing from Bryan Kohberger's motion to dismiss a no camera hearing. So here we go. Let's see what he says about Bryan Kohberger's body language.
Jump right in.
How things are supposed to be. Why did we forget that we passed all these laws? And I don't have a great answer to that, other than I think the only time I ever heard about the field codes before I was looking into this was like a really short.
Now you'll notice Bryan Kohberger is looking at his attorney for a variety of reasons that we're going to get into. I do think that this attorney gives him a lot of confidence.
Back in law school. So, I mean.
Now, one thing you'll also notice, now this is very hard to see, but as he's leaning back in his chair, he glances back at the cameras. Now, I'm pointing that out because I just want you to be aware that he is thinking about the fact that he's being filmed right now based on the body language we're going to see next.
It's somewhat famously kind of the first attempt to codify the law of the day. It takes place in New York.
So if you look at Bryan Kohberger's hands right now, he's doing something like this. We call it steepling. Obviously, he's not doing it in front of his face like I was demonstrating, but it's basically you put your thumb and your tips of your fingers together. And while you're doing that, it's a way of showing people how confident you are, that you're an expert in what you're talking about, that you are feeling important in those moments. Oftentimes you see CEOs, for example, doing this kind of behavior. You also see it from benefits them. What studies have shown is that experts who do this are actually seen to be more believable. However, that's different than when other people do it. Unfortunately, when other people do this, sometimes it can make them seem arrogant. We're going to continue to watch, and I'll explain more about why that is.
One of the things the field code very openly said it was trying to do was fix the grand jury system, because the grand jury system was believed to be essentially broken. For a lot of the same reasons we don't seem to like grand juries very much today.
All right, so as he's talking about grand juries, he puts the steepling down. Let's see where it goes from here.
But at the same time, while the state of New York is trying to figure out ways to.
Once again, when he leans back, he looks back at the cameras. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't say that critically, but it does show that he does have a large awareness of everything going on around him.
State of New York is trying to figure out ways to not have to abide by the language of.
So we're skipping ahead for a couple of minutes because Bryan Kohberger is about to start steepling again, and I wanted to give you some context for when he does it.
And says that the burden, or for that matter, I guess I don't know, we got this all kind of mixed up when we were doing the arguing. So the burden of proof, I think we decided was actually who.
So now they're talking about the burden of proof, and he's choosing to steeple again. Now, this is interesting because I don't think this is a behavior that we've seen a whole lot of from Bryan Kohberger. I haven't watched every single hearing, but the earlier ones, he certainly didn't do that. So it gives us some insight into maybe what he's going to be like during the trial as well. But if you look, he's looking directly at his attorney. He's steepling a little bit higher now. He's doing it very clearly. I do think that this is something that's giving him confidence, that he likes the argument that his attorney's presenting. And it was something I've skipped over. His attorney really has been arguing pretty thoroughly with the judge for a while now. So I think that those types of behaviors are giving him confidence in the direction that this trial is heading.
That I was able to find that in the state of Idaho, all these prosecutors were mistakenly using beyond a reasonable doubt.
So as you can see, he looks down at his own hands while he's putting his hands up to steeple more. Watch this part again.
I was able to find that in the state of Idaho, all these prosecutors were mistakenly using beyond a reasonable doubt. There's just like no indictments going on.
Now, the significance of him raising the steepling. Oftentimes we do this when we're feeling confident, or at least want to appear more confident.
Right.
The higher we do things like that, the more confident we are.
This is very interesting. So he is saying that Bryan Kohberger, he's reading that Bryan Kohberger's confident. He's confident in his lawyer. Wow. Interesting. This is interesting.
Lower tends to be a loss of confidence. So it's interesting that he's raising his hands up right now during this part.
Nobody was going to prison. Nobody was getting the death penalty. It was a free-for-all. And
so then he quickly gave up on having the high steepling. Now the question is that because he's talking about the death penalty and all of these things and that's scary, or is it just because he tried to put it up high and maybe didn't feel as confident once he did it? There could be a number of interpretations for that, but it's interesting that he gave up on that so quickly. And that once again, he's aware of his body language. He looks down at his hands oftentimes while he's doing this. And it shows that he is thinking about how people see him. Let's watch that whole sequence again, then we'll keep going.
there's no reports anywhere that I was able to find that in the state of Idaho, all these prosecutors were mistakenly using beyond a reasonable doubt. There's just like no indictments going on. Nobody was going to prison. Nobody was getting the death penalty. It was a free-for-all, and we had, the idea for who is getting the presentment seems to come from the grand jury members themselves. They just come in with some information about somebody, they make an accusation like it's a complaint, and then it goes off and it gets treated.
So steepling has a lot to do with confidence, someone believing that they are an expert. Now, if somebody isn't an expert or somebody isn't fulfilling that role, steepling oftentimes kind of irritates other people. I imagine that the way people would unconsciously interpret seeing somebody continuing to steeple and put it away and steeple and put it away is they might not see him as having consistent confidence. They might see it as something that's for show rather than how he's actually feeling. And that can work against you when you do things like that. But I do think that he has a lot of confidence in his attorney. I really do.
And with some information about somebody, they make an accusation like it's a complaint, and then it goes off and it gets treated more like a complaint than it does.
So despite the fact that he put the steepling down, he is leaning forward now. And we oftentimes do that when we're trying to connect with somebody, not trying to evade, which means that he thinks that they have good points probably. So he's trying to connect with the judge. He's leaning forward towards him rather than turning his body away or trying to make more distance. It's a very dramatic opening of his portfolio from his attorney.
Well, that's just not what happened. I mean, Judge, courts say things all the time. They call it dicta. When a court is listing off...
Sometimes we call it the law.
Sometimes. But what we're talking about when we talk about evidence is we're talking about it. I mean, nobody was arguing in that case that probable cause was the standard. They were arguing.
I know I keep pointing this out, but it's really interesting to me because it does seem that Bryan Kohberger has a lot of awareness about his body language now. He looks back at the camera. He starts steepling again. He looks at his attorney.
Julie says, I would like to hear him say why he makes his cheeks move like grinding his teeth. I wonder if he ever speaks on that. That's a good point too, Julie. I wonder if he ever speaks on that. Does he speak on that?
It's a very interesting pattern we're getting into here. So I think that he is trying to give off the impression of confidence. I really think that that's what he's trying to do here. At least that's my interpretation. Watch this part again.
I mean, nobody was arguing in that case.
Is there a demand for me all day? I mean, you let me know. Is there a demand for me all day? Because I know once I'm done with this documentary that I've been working on daily, editing and going over with and just messing back and forth with different things. I know once I'm done with that, it's, you know, we're getting into some stuff. But this year one documentary on the Idaho 4 is super big for my channel in general. It's not about views. It's not about none of that. It's just about how much passion and stuff we've been through on my channel in general with the Idaho 4. So this documentary is very important to me.
The probable cause was the standard. They were arguing over whether or not it's fair that some people get a prelim and some people get a grand jury. That's what that argument was about. And the guy didn't come in and say,
See, looking down at his hands again.
Oh no, I got a grand jury and the standard
And looking again.
is beyond a reasonable doubt.
And once again, there's nothing wrong with this. I don't think it's anything wrong at all being aware of body language. I'm talking about body language, obviously. But it's very interesting to me that he has this level of awareness, that he is looking at what he's doing, that he is thinking about steepling from what I can tell.
I love the fact that you want me on. All right. Okay.
I don't like that. I'd rather have a prelim with a probable cause standard. That doesn't occur in that case for various, I'm sure, fantastic reasons. And the same thing happens in these later cases. I mean, it gets responded to.
And then once again, he's elevating his steepling again, looking at the steepling. And I think that once again, it's meant to be sort of like backup for his attorney to say, look how confident we are in this point. So we'll go ahead and stop right there. I know a lot of what I talked about today was steepling, but I think it's significant and it's something different from Bryan Kohberger. So I thought it would be worth pointing out. We may expect to see different body language from him when he takes the stand. We still don't know the extent.
Haley B says, I want the police interrogation video for Christmas. So are you saying on Christmas that they interrogated him before they arrested him in Pennsylvania? What are you, or right after he got arrested in Pennsylvania? So I'm pretty sure that was after Christmas.
To which we're going to see the cameras in the courtroom. Hopefully it will be extensive because I do plan to cover it. I haven't been covering it as much lately because I'm waiting for the trial so we can get to some really interesting coverage. Hopefully you found this interesting. If you have anything else you want me to analyze, please let me know in the comments below. Last thing before we get finished up is I do.
A very good video. That's the end of it. That's the end of the video. But that was the body language breakdown on Bryan Kohberger by a very good channel. I'm going to subscribe after that. Thank you for recommending that to me. Bam Bam. Dr. G explains. Now, if you heard him in the beginning of this video, he said,
a licensed clinical psychologist and body language expert. And to
bang bong, you heard exactly what he said. You get what I'm saying? It's not like we were just hearing from some random schmo. So I like that. I liked hearing that. That was actually very interesting. I mean, we're going to take it for what it is, but in general, it's very interesting. Very, very interesting. Let's hop into this real quick. Now, here it is. This is what I wanted to watch with y'all too.
Child, because it's hooked up in this criminal process, and it's all about the guy who.
Hold up, the Gonsalves. We want to see the Gonsalves family interview, right? Boom. All right, here we are right now.
Who did it, and he's getting the attention. His pictures all over the place, and that's your reality. That is the reality for the families of those 4 University of Idaho students. It's a year now that we're marking when they were murdered. 21-year-old best friends, Kaylee Gonsalves and Maddie Mogen. 20-year-old boyfriend.
Maddie Mogen. Zana Kernodle, Maddie Mogen, Kaylee Gonsalves, and Ethan Chapin.
And girlfriend Ethan Chapin and Zana Kernodle. All stabbed to death in this notoriously grisly scene inside the girl's home, early morning hours, November 13. A month later, in some amazing investigating, 28-year-old Washington State University criminology teaching assistant Bryan Kohberger arrested. The trial set to begin next year. Tracking it all along, News Nation senior correspondent Bryan Enton, and from the right angle, investigatively, of course, but the spotlight in terms of who matters has always been on the victims and their families. And he sat down again with the Gonsalves family. And Bryan, I appreciate you staying on it, but just as much, the focus.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's really all about the victims' families and what they're going through, and they're not doing well. I mean, they're just not. Kaylee's mom told me that people ask her all the time, "Oh, how are you doing? How are you doing?" Because people don't know what else to say. She says, we're doing good. We're doing good." But she says they're actually not doing well. I mean, they have to deal with this every single day. And not only deal with the grief of losing their daughter, but the ongoing delayed court process. And then they go to the court hearings, Chris, which is just unbelievably painful and disturbing for them because it's such a small courtroom. Listen to what Kaylee's parents told me about having to go to all of these hearings.
The worst part, obviously, is being
Miss Brazy. It's allegedly, the rumor I've heard is that there's a 15-minute interrogation with Pennsylvania police between Bryan Kohberger and Pennsylvania police. That's what I heard. But hearing something and it being proven as a fact are two different things.
in the same room
I mean?
with him. I know what he has done. It makes me sick that he sits there in his suit and he sits there and taps his hands and you're just sitting there and he sits there and rocks back and forth in the chair, and I'm thinking, why is he sitting in a big old judge chair and all dressed up in a fresh haircut? And I've looked it up, never seen another murderer or whatever he is convicted up to this point of a case, not in handcuffs, not in shackles, one or the other or both, and in orange.
That really bothers
for them.
Chris. That really bothers them that the judge allowed Kohberger to wear that suit and to not be shackled. They don't want to see him like that. They say, okay, for the trial, fine, but they don't like seeing him. They say he almost looks like a business executive sitting there in the courtroom. Yeah. And what did you take away this time? Because look, you've been following them, you're in contact, you've spoken to them formally before. What stood out to you in this interview? They're fighters. They're the kind of parents that aren't going to sit back and grieve quietly. They trust the prosecutor, but they also feel like no one.
I mean, chat, how do you guys feel about that? I agree with her. I agree with her 100%. I've seen a lot of you guys' comments like, why is he in a suit? And then I've seen people be like, well, you never seen somebody in a suit? I get her frustration.
Is going to fight for their daughter like they can, and they fought to keep that house not torn down. You remember that, Chris? They wanted to tear the house down, and they fought and they fought and they fought, and the FBI ended up going back in the house after they decided to keep the house up, which was a real victory for them. This is what they had to say about that.
I knew in my heart what was best for those girls and Ethan. I knew what was best was to keep that around until they did more. And there'll be a point when I'll be like, you know what? Let it go.
That is going to be sad to me. And people think, how can that tear it down? And it's just like, look, my daughter lived a happy life there. Yes, she was murdered there, ultimately murdered. But that was this much time, we have pictures of them in the house. When that house goes, it's going to be hard.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting, Chris. A lot of people want to see the house torn down. Yeah, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you.
No.
Wow.
The FBI went back, you're reporting, right? Recently.
Yeah, they went back. I was out there last week. We had the video. They were going in and out of the house. They did a whole new 3D map of the house. which again is like a victory for the family because they fought to keep the house standing.
Hey, thank you for watching. Please.
Man, that's crazy to me. They want that house up, and I was just talking about that earlier. They want that house up. They want the house up, and I believe they should keep it up. I believe they should keep it up. Why shouldn't they? Right up here we go. Turn this bad boy up real quick so we got sound.
10 days from now is November 13th, and that is 1 year ago.
And then
it is the date when the world came to a halt for a university town in Idaho. But the world really just stopped completely, just changed forever for the families of 4 students there. Their parents had shipped them off to college. But these 4 kids were savagely murdered within just a few months of school starting. And the house was just off campus. It is still right there, just off campus, boarded up like a frightening scar. 1122 King Road. The school, the prosecutors, even the defense wanted the house torn down as soon as possible. But some of the families didn't, and they fought it, and it's a good thing they did, because this week, prosecutors and the FBI were back there, inside, clipboards in hand. NewsNation senior national correspondent Bryan Enton sat down with the parents of Kaylee Gonzalez, a victim of that crime.
Ashley, this has obviously been a difficult time for the victims' families in Idaho, the Goncalves family included. They say it's difficult to grieve when the court process is ongoing and frustrating for them because it's been so delayed. They did have a bit of a victory, though, they feel. You remember they fought to keep the house where the murders happened standing. The University of Idaho wanted to tear the house down. The Goncalves family fought it. The house ultimately was not torn down, and it turns out the FBI has now gone back out to the house. We reported on it this week. They went back out to the house to do 3D imaging. I spoke to the Goncalveses about that, and also just about the court process and what they want to see happen in general.
I knew in my heart what was best for those girls.
I got one right here.
And Ethan, I knew what was best was to keep that around until they did more.
Okay,
And,
we just seen that one.
There'll be a point when I'll be like, you know what? Let it go. Let it go.
And our agenda of keeping it around isn't because, well, it's going to be so sad when it's torn down. I mean, that is going to be sad to me. And people think, how can that tear it down? And it's just like, look, my daughter lived a happy life there. Yes, she was murdered there, ultimately murdered. But that was this much time. We have pictures of them in the house. When that house goes, it's going to be hard. I don't want to go in it. I've never even been to the house. I've never drove by it. I don't want to. But it's still going to be, when they're like, that house is gone, it is going to be very emotional for me. But that wasn't why, the emotional side of things. It was strictly is this good for the prosecution? Is this good for the case?
If he pled guilty and said, I'll plead guilty in exchange for a life sentence, have you thought about that?
Yeah, I don't want that, because I do know, I studied the criminal system and the difference between life in prison. Even if it's 20, 30 years, he's 23 hours locked up. He doesn't get to do what is it, BTK
killer?
PTK.
Or whatever.
We've found out that he writes papers for other prisoners and gets treated really well because he's intelligent, and he's able to help other prisoners get preferential treatment through the legal system. We don't want that type of behavior to happen in our case, where he has influence outside of this event. So
that's been a hard one, though. I mean,
you could write a book.
Did we just hear that right? Hold up.
Don't want to, but it's still going to be, when they're like, that house is gone, it is going to be very emotional for me.
Just said again.
But that wasn't why, the emotional side of things. It was strictly is this good for the...
Did he say that he was helping people inside? Listen again.
Prosecution, is this good for the case?
If he pled guilty and said, I'll plead guilty in exchange for a life sentence. Have you thought about that?
Yeah, I don't want that because I do know, I studied the criminal system and the difference between life in prison, even if it's 20, 30 years, he's 23 hours locked up. He doesn't get to do what is it, BTK?
BTK killer?
PTK.
Or whatever.
We've found
I get exactly what Steve's saying, and he's right.
Found out that he writes papers for other prisoners and gets treated really well because he's intelligent and he's able to help other prisoners get preferential treatment through the legal system. We don't want that type of behavior to happen in our case where he has influence outside of this event. So
that's been a hard one, though. I mean,
he could write a book, he can do things. Idaho doesn't have a law particular that protects against that.
The hard thing with that question, honestly, is that's where you forget, and I don't know how it's possible, but you forget that there's 3 other families involved here. We're not the only ones. It's not just, I'm like, this is not a one, band,
one crime fits all.
This is
right.
This isn't just our daughter.
Right. Some
and
might
I know
not
that
want to go through the trial.
I know some of the other families definitely would be, yes, like, let's go. Where do I sign? And I understand that 100%. 100%. I understand that. But you know what? Ultimately, it's not our call. I mean, they might ask us our opinion like they did on the death penalty, and we'll give it. But just because, our opinion is yay or nay doesn't mean that, that's what we get.
The Goncalves parents have said that they are for the death penalty in the Bryan Kohberger case. But again, it's just frustrating for them how long all of this is taking. They have to take vacation days and plan their whole life with work around when these court hearings happen. And many times the hearings pop up at the last minute. This all while they continue to try and grieve for Christy, Kaylee's mom. She says that it's difficult for her to go through Kaylee's things and to go into her bedroom.
But I've only been up to Kaylee's room. I mean, it's right up there, right at the top of the stairs. I've only been up there twice. And neither time was for any amount of time. It was like in and out. Oops, in, out. That's all we have. That is it. And it's just real. It's just so real sometimes. And it's just the worst that somebody could do this to somebody's family. So many families.
The Goncalves family really is just so strong despite everything that they've been through. Obviously, this is an especially difficult time with the 1-year mark of the murders coming up on November 13th.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com.
Wow, like that's crazy, man. Super sad. Super, super, super sad. Hold up 1 second. Okay, so we seen that. Okay, we were right here. Let's get back to it.
Show how this person was harmed.
Oh, you know what? We missed it. Hold up, we missed it. There's one with Ethan Chapin's parents, and I just seen it. I had it right here. Somebody was talking about it in chat, but I seen it beforehand.
Nearly 1 year after 4 University of Idaho students were murdered near campus, their families are finding ways to remember them. Ethan Chapin was one of those students, a triplet born and raised here in Skagit County. And this month, he would have turned 21. I sat down with his parents, Jim and Stacy, to talk about how their family is doing, what comes next, and Stacy Chapin's new book, The Boy Who Wore Blue.
On a beautiful star-filled October night, triplet children were born, and oh, what a sight. 3 healthy babies, what could we say? Such a joyful, amazing, and momentous day. But there was something incredible about that boy who wore blue. His bubbly personality immediately shone through. I just needed people to have the true story of him. For people who know him, it's a little bit of a memoir. And I think for people who don't know him, it's literally the message how Ethan lived his life. Tell us about him.
Ethan, he was truly one of a kind.
He was an exceptional kid from the day he was born.
I mean, he just lived life to the fullest. He kept everybody in check.
And not just because he was 6'4".
No, not because he was 6'4". It's just that there was just a way about him, and he had a good message. You know, his message is just be yourself and have fun and do good for everybody.
You just miss him walking into a room and
Yeah.
giving you a hug and making some funny comment, and he was amazing.
Is there anything that you miss the most?
Hugging him. Oh, I'd give anything. And yeah, that's it. I'd give anything to hug that kid again. In his blue Patagonia, his puffy blue Patagonia coat. Right?
How are you after almost a year?
It's shocking it's been. We spent, I call it a period of time, there was about 5 months that I call it the depths of hell. I mean, we went there. We've been there. I think you have to go there in order to start the journey out. That is the process of healing and figuring out how you live your life without this person that's been in it forever. I have a place kind of where Ethan lives in there, and it's a safe spot. You know, for me, but I think overall, under all of these circumstances, I think we're doing well. This thing took one of our kids, but it can't take the rest of us.
I think about Maisie and Hunter a lot because I'm a multiple. And there's a unique, special connection that multiples have that other siblings do not have.
Yeah.
I know that. And so I've thought about them often, having lost a piece of themselves in losing their brother.
Jim and I can sit here and tell you what it feels like to lose a child. I honestly cannot tell you what it must feel like for Maisie and Hunter to lose literally a piece of them. It's profoundly different for them than it is for us.
They came home mid-May after school was out, and they spent all summer at our Idaho home, and both worked. And it seems like they healed a lot during that period of time. It's just going to take time for us all.
When we send our kids off to school, to college, we think it's one of the safest places they could be.
Yes.
I mean, Moscow, Idaho?
Not in your wildest imagination or nightmares even.
It's so heartbreaking.
Could you imagine something like this?
We were at Parents' Weekend the week before. I mean, literally the week before, and just had the best time with the kids. And you would never think that something like this could ever happen.
It was the best weekend. And we were in the King Street house that weekend. I mean, we were like, these kids are living their best life.
You put a post on social, you sent it to me, that you spend no time being angry. That would not be energy well spent.
We don't use that word anger.
We can't bring Ethan back. I mean, let's all be honest. Nothing we can do can bring him back. And when you start to feel
I can feel their aspect on that. That's super sad. But yeah, no, we don't use that word anger. I kind of like their attitude of, everybody grieves differently, but they're trying to be as positive in life as they can and peaceful people. I respect that.
angry, it literally can take you down a rabbit hole that just isn't a healthy place to be.
So what does justice look like for you in this?
Oh, I have not been asked that question.
The person who is in jail right now, that it's gonna take care of itself. Nothing we can do or say or anything is gonna change what's gonna happen to that individual.
You have no plans to even go to the trial, to even be in the courtroom from start to finish?
No, there is no closure. The only closure I have is knowing that my family is good and healthy, and we move on with our lives and do what we were doing prior to this terrible thing that's happened to our family.
It's a choice. You just have to tuck that kid somewhere in there, and I'm thankful for the 20 years we had with him.
Totally.
100%. So you have a tattoo on your arm. So it's from a note that Ethan wrote me probably the 4th grade. And, we just signed it. I love you, Mom.
We are coming back up onto Parents' Weekend and a big birthday for your kids, 21.
21 was something that we talked about forever. Having these triplets turn 21 was going to be the greatest the greatest night ever. That night cannot take away from Maisie and Hunter. So, Parents Weekend, it'll be a little bit camouflaged in Parents Weekend, and then we'll go out and we're going to celebrate Maisie and Hunter. We cannot forget that that's the priority.
Is there anything that you would want to share with parents who've suffered just a horrific loss?
Find something positive in every day. Find something that you feel like brings you joy in a day. There is always something there, no matter how dark the day feels. We found it every single day. He was selfless, caring, generous, and warm. And wherever he went, the friends would all swarm.
We want to pass on his positive energy.
This tale, the story of the boy who wore blue, is a message for
Run it back again, Mama.
every single day.
Run it back again.
He was selfless, caring, generous, and warm. And wherever he went, the friends would all swarm.
We want to pass on his positive energy.
This tale, the story of the boy who wore blue, is a message for everyone, including you.
That's his legacy for you.
That is.
Yeah, it is. Life is short, so give it your best. Be happy, smile, and encourage the rest.
Tell you what, that shit made me drop some tears right there.
My sincere.
Oh man. Woo. All right, let's finish this one up. The one that we were on. Idaho student murders, top 5 issues delaying Bryan Kohberger's trial. And the inmate escapes. Have you guys seen the inmate escapes recently? They're really rising. Like literally. I don't know if you guys have been keeping up with inmate escapes, but there's been so much stuff going on in Salem. There was a Salem inmate that escaped, Franklin County Correction Center. It's back-to-back days. 7 high-profile hospital prisoner escapers. What's escapers? Undergoing a medical procedure. So they escaped during an undergoing medical procedure. Oregon. So there's been a lot of escapees too out there. That's crazy. Lots of escapes this year. Heartbreaking. Picture of them so similar.
Or suffered, and conversely, redeeming qualities of this person.
All right, so back to looking at this. This was about the top 5 issues delaying Bryan Kohberger's trial. That's what it's
Lord knows how far and wide that investigation can reach.
Well, some of the reporting has indicated that he had a heroin addiction at one point. I imagine that has to play a role and will play a role in this case in terms of not whether he committed the crime, but if he's ultimately convicted, his past abuse and the struggles. I imagine that could be a theme in a penalty phase. No?
It depends on what they find, because to some people, that is what we call mitigating. This poor man, he had a drug habit. To other people, that's, oh, look at him. He's also a druggie.
Right.
So you have to learn why it happened, how it happened, how long it happened. If I became a heroin addict after an industrial accident,
right,
which gave me so much back pain, that's one thing. If I'm not going to rock and roll parties and become a heroin addict, maybe that's another. So
interesting.
The answer is possibly. But the first thing is you don't preclude anything.
Heard. Yeah, no, a lot of people said that. A lot of people, even Todd, he said I'd be out there too. I know Todd, I'd be out there too.
You gather everything.
Right. And that's why it might be taking some time. Before we move on to the second issue that might be delaying this case, are you surprised in the sense, not surprised, but some people were wondering whether or not he wouldn't waive his right to a speedy trial, hold the prosecution to their burden, force them to go to trial.
So as far as the speedy trial, and I want to ask you guys this because I completely think that He screwed himself over. He should have just went forward with it. Now they even have time to tie up knots in the case. So I feel like the defense, the defense it just gave the prosecution to tie up their knots even more tighter. Your thoughts? I don't know. Drop them in the comments.
Rather quickly, which can sometimes throw a prosecutor off. Did you think that that might have been an option that he considered? You know, look, you say you have all this evidence. You got to go to trial right now. I don't think you can prove your case.
Most lawyers would try and discourage a client from doing that.
Mm-hmm.
This is not like the argument in Georgia where some of the people charged along with Donald Trump said, okay, bring us to trial. This is a capital case.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't have arrested without a really thorough investigation. There's, as we know and have discussed on other times.
Said, hold on, if he's truly innocent, he should have gone ahead. Right. Because if you're innocent, you're going to want to get it done and, done as fast as possible. Right. He hasn't been on heroin for a decade. Drugs had nothing to do with this crime. Arlene says 2 inmates escaped from Philly prison, 2 a murderer and drug dealer. They shut it up quick. Don't know if they were captured. Damn. He should have done a speedy trial, said Brianna. Can't tie knots but no string.
Evidence pointing to him.
Bing bang.
And to roll the dice and say, well, let's see if we can get it quick. Oops, but I'll be unprepared if I lose.
Right.
And have no death penalty defense. Really bad move.
Okay, let's move on to the second issue that might be holding up trial proceedings or had held up the ultimate trial. I would say I call this the defense's legal arguments, right? All these kind of pretrial motions, which can take time to brief and argue and decide. One in particular concerns the grand jury indictment. In Idaho, there are 2 options for bringing a defendant to trial. A secret grand jury of about 16 to 23 people can listen to the evidence presented by the prosecution and decide, yes, that person should be bound over for trial. Or there can be a preliminary hearing where all that is done in open court. The judge decides if the case goes forward. We know that in May, the Latah County District Court announced a grand jury indicted Bryan Kohberger, so a preliminary probable cause hearing was canceled. Now, here's where things get interesting because Kohberger's defense team argued that the indictment should be thrown out. First, they raised issues of bias and improper evidence was submitted and evidence was withheld. Now, I tell you a lot, we don't know a lot about that because, again, this was a secret grand jury proceeding. What we do know is that they raised this other issue that was briefed and argued, and it was raised. The defense argued that the grand jurors were given an improper instruction as to the standard of proof. The grand jurors were instructed to return an indictment if they find probable cause exists, meaning that there are reasonable grounds to support that Kohberger committed the crimes. That's the typical standard we hear about across the country. Pretty low standard. They say you can indict a ham sandwich because the burden's so low.
There we go. The ham sandwich phrase.
That is not the
all
standard.
right. So I did get a message from the expert that I have coming onto the documentary. So hold on, I'm gonna wait to see what time they want to settle, and we'll get that on. May have to get off and do that and record that. But boy, this documentary is gonna be good.
Under Idaho law.
Said OJ was also found innocent. In my opinion, more evidence in that
jury
case
should
than
only
this
return
one.
an indictment if they find proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Not only is that the standard that's higher than probable cause, it's actually the highest standard we have in criminal law, the highest legal bar. Give everybody a sense of this. Jay Logsdon, an attorney for Kohberger, presented the argument to Judge John Judge. Yes, again, that's his name. Back in October.
And the first question that
I want to be exonerated. Good luck.
And you start with the plain language, which we argue, what warrants a finding or a conviction by a trial jury is beyond a reasonable doubt. And it meant that back in 1887, when the territory took all of these statutes, almost entirely from the state of California, and it means it today. And then we also pointed out that the great state of California, when they had these on their books from back in the 50s, had already a case in 1962 where they said that it's clearly something more than probable cause, but they weren't too specific about exactly what it meant. I'm now put in the position of trying to explain why that occurred and why, in the year of our Lord 2023, we are suddenly finding out that that's not quite how things are supposed to be. Why did we forget that we passed all these laws? And I don't have a great answer for that, but nobody's really been digging into this or raising it until this time. So when the court says, look, the Supreme Court's already got a rule on this, Supreme Court's already ruled on it, it's just not true. They have never ruled that probable cause is the basis because there was an argument about it. And they said, no, you're wrong, it's probable cause. That hasn't occurred. They ruled a lot of things, but that's not one rule.
So while Judge admitted he found the argument interesting, he ended up denying the motion to throw out the indictment, so it stands. Now, Jules, I thought arguments like this, after they briefed it, they argued in front of the judge, I thought that delayed the case, that delayed the trial. Do you agree?
Maybe, and I'm sorry to be equivocal there.
No, that's fine.
In other words, normally there's an understanding that sometime in that 6-month period that you referenced, motions will be filed, judges schedule periodic status dates,
Here's
and we
another one.
dispense with motions. Given the complexity and seriousness of this case, it may have taken more time.
You said defense knows he's the right guy. They're going to play this out until the money is gone. Bryan's lawyers know what they're doing. Wow, Judge, how did that happen? They're just they definitely know what they're doing. He said, Judge during that, it wasn't the last November 2nd hearing. It was the one before that. Judge said, I'm baiting you. I was like, why? That's the first time I heard a judge tell a defense lawyer, I'm baiting you.
Time to get those motions together.
Maybe you've seen it. I haven't.
Them.
That was my first time seeing
I
a
know
judge
in a
say
minute we're going to be talking about the DNA issue.
Bing bang.
Yep. And until the defense received the DNA information, it wasn't ripe. That's what we call it, right? Ready for them to file such a motion saying, my God, they use this interesting technique. Now let's do some research. So normally we get motions in all sorts of pretrial proceedings.
I appreciate
and
it.
still can reach the projected trial date. Sometimes things go slower. Certainly in this case, and let me just finish with this point. When you are representing a capital defendant, it is your duty to look at every possible legal issue.
Yeah,
because at the end of the day,
I've never heard that.
the person's facing death.
Look, even when this was argued,
Thinking the same thing because he literally said, I'm baiting you. He didn't say I'm debating you. He said, I'm baiting you. Like, it's a good argument. I'm baiting you. I just never heard that. So I was pretty blown away when he said that to him.
It was a novel argument. I hadn't heard it before. The judge even said, you might find some success at the Supreme Court level to Kohberger's attorney because he thought it was a pretty interesting argument, but obviously there was only so much he could do. All right, you mentioned DNA. Let's talk about issue number 3. This is a holdup. So this other argument from the defense team is about the credibility of the DNA match that investigators allegedly made to Kohberger. Give everybody background here. So according to the probable cause affidavit, police found the sheath of a K-bar knife next to the body of one of the victims. The FBI constructed a family tree through something called investigative genetic genealogy, or IgG. And they do this typically through online platforms like 23andMe and Ancestry.com. Well, the FBI did that, and then they sent a tip to local law enforcement about Bryan Kohberger. Now, originally, the DNA found on the knife was compared to trash that was recovered from outside the Kohberger home, and that's when they found a match of the DNA to Kohberger's father. After Kohberger was arrested, they took a cheek swab, and now court documents reveal that the DNA recovered from that knife is almost an identical match to Bryan Kohberger. Now, the defense wants to know specific details about how law enforcement used IgG to identify Kohberger as their suspect. And the judge recently agreed to do an in-camera review of the IgG evidence. The judge will look over all of it from the prosecutor's office and the FBI and decide what needs to be turned over to the defense. The judge has set a December 1st deadline to get all the DNA evidence in hand. You see, prosecutors blame the FBI and the private lab for the delay because of the process of getting all the reports. So, Jules, with all that in mind, What do you think is going on here? Because it's my understanding that prosecutors here are saying
What's going on, Aaron?
They don't intend to show the IgG results at trial, and the information wasn't used to obtain any warrants in the case, but the judge is kind of leaning towards the defense that it might be an issue, and maybe that's what's taking up some time here.
So I read part of the judge's opinion this morning, and the judge said, actually, may be relevant to trial, maybe not relevant. We'll cross that bridge another time.
That's a good point, too.
There's enough here that I will look at it to see if there's anything that might be pertinent, and that also that
I do like that. Some judges like to see what you know, and I bait you for your argument. Yeah, that's true too. That's like I said, very good
disclosure would not violate the privacy interests of third parties. If I were the defense lawyers, I think I'd want it for a couple of reasons. One is, did it have any alternate suspects in there who they discarded? Now, given all the other ties to this defendant, whether that's illusory, I don't want to say. But that's being a competent or thorough defense attorney to check. The second thing is, if there is some flaw in the investigation, sometimes that's like grabbing the thread on the back of a sweater and you pull it and the whole sweater unravels. The United States Supreme Court has said in one decision that it's fair game for a defense to attack the quality or thoroughness of an investigation.
I thought they would do something though. I'm not sure if Bryan isn't already got grounds for an appeal after trial because of Ann Taylor's conflict of interest with being Zana's mom's lawyer already. Huh.
At the end of the day, I'm not suggesting
she dropped
either of those will bear fruit, but I think that's what folks would be looking for.
Let's break that down a little bit more. So obviously you mentioned the privacy issues because you don't want to reveal the identities of Kohberger's relatives. You might need a protective order here. It also sounds like this review is going to happen behind the scenes in the judge's chambers. So I think a lot of this is going to be kept out of the public eye. One of the things that I think complicates it though, right, is that the prosecution, they claim they don't have these FBI records in creating that family tree. And so when we talk about the prosecution handing over materials to the defense, if it's not something they have or they're using in their case, I thought that was interesting. Now, you mentioned that, I think you mentioned that the judge cited a recent case where they said that any records that are held by any law enforcement agency that was involved in the prosecution of a defendant, that's part of the discovery in the case, even if the prosecution doesn't have it. FBI was working with local and state law enforcement here. So I think that's a part of it that complicates it too, right? I mean, should the prosecution have to turn over something that they technically don't have?
So there are two issues here. One is, I don't know the state law and how broad that is on discovery obligations. Under the United States Constitution and what we call the Brady Principle, and that means very simply that if the prosecution has anything in its possession, and that includes the police it has worked with, that might in some way make it less likely that person is guilty or indicate maybe something that would reduce the severity of the charge or go to sentencing, they have to turn it over and get it from law enforcement agencies they've worked cooperatively with. I'm not sure yet if this material is Brady material, because again, Brady material is Brady material only if it tends to help the defendant. But the judge may be applying that
What's
notion.
going on, Anita? Welcome.
Hey, you brought the FBI in, they cooperated with you. Pick up the phone and call them.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Now, I think one of the problems is the FBI may not have preserved all their notes. But that's separate from, okay, well, send us what you have.
Look,
and again, I'm sorry, the only person who's going to look at it literally is the judge. In that in camera, it's going to be the judge alone or the judge.
Yeah, but then Bill Thompson said they're literally asking for something we don't have. So I don't.
With their court clerks or researchers. The prosecutor and the defense, as I understand it, won't be in there. And then the judge is going to say, I find nothing, or I find something, or my goodness, you have to get it all.
Yeah, and that could take a little bit of time to figure out what to turn over and how it's going to be used. So that was issue number 3. This is issue number 4. You talked about it a little bit already. There's so much evidence. In a filing back in May, the prosecution told the defense it was handing over 10,000 pages of reports and written materials, more than 10,000 photographs.
Thank you.
9,200.
I appreciate that.
51
Welcome back home, Sox. Woo!
Bing bang. Peter done. A few moments later.
Terabytes of video, audio, and digital materials. That seems like a lot to go over. First of all, Jules, are you surprised there is so much here? And how on earth is the defense going to review all this?
So I'm not surprised, because this was an incredibly thorough and I think multi-agency investigation. As to how the defense is supposed to go through it, I don't know. And this is obviously akin to the argument Donald Trump's lawyers are making. Right? You want us to go to trial in a case with 3 million pages of documents, whatever one thinks pro or con about Donald Trump. There should be enough opportunity for anyone's lawyers to go through whatever there is to go through. There are certain artificial intelligence tools which can, at least apparently, help separate some of the wheat from the chaff. But in a capital case, I would be awfully uncomfortable not having my team, even if we divided it up, look at every single thing. And that has to take some time and some money.
It does. And we know that the amount of evidence was one of the reasons that Kohberger's defense team said they
should hit that like button if you're coming in. What, 530? We should have at least 500.
Needed more time to prepare his alibi defense, which I wanted to ask you about, because back in August, the defense filed this alibi that Kohberger had a habit of going for drives alone, including at night. It's interesting because it would
he long lived to take rides at night. I remember reading that.
Explain away the movements of his car, his cell phone activity on the night of the killings. And are there any witnesses who can definitively say where Kohberger was exactly? So it seems that volume of material they're trying to use maybe to show this alibi.
So the word alibi is pretty interesting, and this will vary from state to state. Normally, a defendant doesn't have to say up front, hey, here's my defense. But because alibi, to respond to it, would take some investigation by the prosecution, the U.S. Supreme Court has said it's constitutional to say, if you're going to say alibi, you have to do some disclosure. Now, and the other thing about
but Becky says, but the FBI or another agency may have the information. And if they do, he meaning prosecution needs to get it from the other agency and turn it over to the defense.
Alibi means I could have been around the corner. It doesn't have to be I was across the state. So to the extent that they want to defend by saying he was driving on nearby roads, but didn't turn into that home, technically that sounds like an alibi. Now you use the word habit. There are 2 ways that this guy can prove I always drive this way. One is to testify. The other is to put on a bunch of people who say I was his roommate, or I dated them or something. And it struck me as crazy. Every third night he'd go out for this long ride. We call that habit evidence, if that's what they're trying to build up. And
what?
They don't want to put on an alibi and then have the rug pulled out from under them by saying, whoops, page 933,212 has you at a traffic signal at a different part of the state.
Right.
And obviously no lawyer ethically can do that. And if you came upon that, you'd also want to be in a place to sit down with your client and say, we need to talk.
So yeah, they need to figure out how they're going to prepare that. That was so interesting. Yeah, it's either him on the stand or some witnesses or some sort of other evidence that he goes on these kind of drives. All right. issue number 5, and I'm sure there's a lot of other reasons why there's delays. You know, people get sick, things like that. But this is what we thought were the big 5 issues. So this is issue number 5. Well, now, and this has been developing over just the past couple of weeks.
The older dude?
The FBI investigators have been back at the home on King Road where the killings took place, which the owner donated the house to the University of Idaho. The school had been planning to demolish the house.
We were just talking about that earlier, so you just heard him donated it.
But this has been put on hold as investigators went back to the property because they're now preparing visual displays to be used during the trial. Photos, videos, even audio exhibits, as well as a physical model of the property. I imagine this will all help jurors at the eventual trial to understand what the home looked like, the layout. But putting these models and exhibits together, it takes time. And family members of the victims have been against the planned demolition. They have said that this is a key piece of evidence. What do you think, Jules?
I think that it's really important that every juror see what we describe the same way. If I were to describe my house right now and say, well, I have a back patio. Oh, when I say patio, you may think cement and somebody else may think flagstone. And whether it's done with a video or a mock-up or something, if someone is testifying, one of the survivors says, well, I was on the second floor rear. No one will know what that means without some diagram or something. And we're moving from the two-dimensional, just the flat diagram, to videos and photographs. Actually, there's been a little bit published about starting to imagine using, what is it, VR and AR to go and create artificial reality mock-ups of a crime scene that people could walk through. I teach a lot about communication and making sure a jury sees what I know something looks like is really hard.
Hold on, Sunshine, the tail
And
line.
so to the extent that the prosecutors are doing this because they think it will help tell their story in a coherent way and prove their case, good for them.
And
whether
Chris
it's
said
going to
good
be
for them.
overkill and they really need it, we'll see when the trial happens.
And it takes time to put this stuff together. So I mean, these are 5 what we thought were issues, big issues that are delaying the case. I mean, you and I could talk back and forth about when we actually think this trial will happen. Real quick, when do you think it actually is going to happen?
Part of that depends on the patience of the judge.
Right.
Part of that depends on, if I were the judge, I would be asking the defense and the prosecution for periodic updates.
Yep.
How are you doing? What do you think you need going forward? So that at some point I could get a sense of a realistic timeline. From everything you're describing, spring or next summer, or maybe next fall, which is not unusual in a capital case.
No, I mean, anybody who follows law and crime knows that when we cover these trials, the actual date of the crime and the actual date of the trial can be years away from one another. And as we just went through, there's a lot of complicating factors. Professor Jules Epstein, so good seeing you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Jules Epstein. Professor Jules Epstein.
Bing bang.
Pretty interesting. Mr. Jules Epstein. All right, so I have to go get ready. I have to go do this little interview real quick. So I don't know if I could get back on today, but I have to go do this interview real quick for the documentary that we got going on, and I have to go now. I just got a message. Do you have this at the time? Are you ready now? All right. So I got a message. I'm about to go do this. The expert coming on to the documentary. I'm gonna go record that, and I will holler at you guys. I appreciate everybody who came by this stream. Wow. Okay, so it's time to it's time, baby. I'll talk to you guys in a little bit. Love you. Thank you guys for coming by again. I mean to rush out, but I need to go record this, and they're ready now. So let's go get it done.
G-Ball, you gotta stop doing this.
Look, all my life has been neglection, so now I pick up the pen and use it as a weapon. Yeah, you can see that I'm affected. People getting killed for nothing but obsession. You need to look at your reflection and decide who you are. Stop acting disconnected. Got mothers killing kids. People kill to live. Well, I be on the mic, speaking how I live. Every day I wake up, it's another person that's dead, and YouTube has to solve it because the law is filling kids. I'm disgusted at the evil in the end, and if you connect the dots, you'll see the vision in your head. Why do people die as victim to the streets? They wonder why I'm up all night and can't sleep. I'll be the voice for everyone who can't speak.